progress.
I think you're good to go.
Looks like we lost John early.
Hold on to log in again.
Can we begin? Everything works? All right, I have no way of acknowledging if anybody else on Zoom can hear me, but we're going to begin. Welcome everyone to the November meeting of the Rush Planning Board. Welcome to winter. We have a pretty full agenda tonight, and we're starting late due to Zoom technical difficulties, but the agenda is very similar to what we had planned for the October meeting. We had a number of events that prevented us from having the required three-person quorum present in the room. So we had to cancel the meeting, unfortunately, and I regret that. Mr. Daniel Cornwall, it's delayed you by another month. We had one person of the five who resigned unexpectedly back in September. We had one family with COVID, and we had another one with a family emergency. So we were down to just two, and legally we had no alternative but to cancel. We could have had the meeting, but it wouldn't have been a meeting legally. So first part of the agenda is approval of the minutes. Have the members had a chance to look at the minutes from September 27, 2022?
Yes.
And any comments?
I have a couple. Just looking in Word, there's a few places where there's spaces, there should be spaces and typical stuff that is flagged there. There was trying to find the it was Johan the state, it should be stated. It's the page 3. The paragraph down starts with Chairman Strzok asked. Last sentence, Joe stated the program for the rendering is limited.
Bill stated.
Then on the same, that was the same page. Yeah. Oh, page 4. Third paragraph starts with Deputy Chaos also asked about, and it's the site distance is SIGHT. Is actual visual, not a.
Which paragraph was that?
That's the third paragraph. First sentence.
I'm going to page 4.
I'm sorry, page 4.
Yeah.
MCDOT site distance.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you said the SIG.
SIGHT.
The other side.
Yeah. And that's the only ones I found. It's not a big deal.
Rick, you have anything? Yeah, I mean, I looked over this 18 pages and it was 95% written by Deputy Supervisor Amber Corbin, who was substituting for Valerie at the time. So, yeah, I mean, I found a few other typos as well, but nothing. So good. Okay, so I make a resolution to adopt the meeting minutes from September 27 as amended. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Valerie,
Mhm.
do you want to do the roll call?
Sure. So member Werzer,
Aye.
member S,
Aye.
and Chairman Strong.
Aye. Okay, moving on. We need to reopen the public hearing for Fieldstone Estates. It was tabled on July 26, 2022. Valerie, you want to read the preamble to that?
Application 2022-06P, Fieldstone Estates, Section 2 by Daniel Cornwall, requesting revised subdivision and site plan approval for 3 lots. The property is located at the southeast corner of Rush Henrietta Town Line Road and East River Road, and is zoned R30. Continuing from July 26, 2022, Planning Board meeting.
I know normally you don't make a motion to open a public hearing, but to lift it from the table, you should make a motion to reopen the public hearing.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to reopen the public hearing. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Do the roll call.
Member Werzer.
Aye.
Member S.
Aye.
And Chairman Strong.
Aye. Okay, so it was a long time ago that we actually read most everything into the record. What happened is the project was revised downward to make it simpler to meet a number of requirements, including seeker. And we had agreed previously among this board that we would accept the agencies who had responded to the prior plan, because it was essentially what we have now is essentially a subset of that. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to go into further detail with all the agencies when they've already essentially proved what's included here and more. There are a few new things to read, but before we do that, Mr. Cornwall, do you want to have any remarks you'd like to give?
Yeah, I'm surprised the engineer's not here, but I've had a couple good conversations with the engineer. I think we're compatible at everything. I had a recent conversation with Sherman.
Kittens,
With,
kittens, yeah, GITTES.
I think it was, yeah, Monday morning. I started with him. One of the last outstanding things is the SWIP. And we pretty much have come to the conclusion on that we can work things out. And maybe we had a concern about how it was going to be implemented, and I made the suggestion to him that we include in the SWIP that we have a pre-construction meeting before construction starts. That way everybody's on the same page. Everybody knows, everybody that, because it's going to be a new owner and a new contractor. Because it will be, I will no longer be the owner at that time. I'm going to.
Excuse me, Mr. Bell.
What do you think you
Yep.
wouldn't mind speaking closer to here, then everybody will be able to hear
Okay.
you, I'm sorry.
Usually nobody has a problem here.
Yeah.
It's okay. I'm not bashful. Since there'll be a new owner and obviously the contractor when the construction actually starts. The SWIP is not really set up for that. So what we're going to do is I have to sign the certification that I prepared it, okay? And that's part of the SWIP, and that's done. But the second part of the certification is that the owner operator also has to sign the certification. He has to, and that certification says that he has read and will understands the SWIP. And what the pre-construction meeting will do, because the SWIP is, as Sherman indicated, it's a living document. At that time, if they want to make some changes to the SWIP, then they can do that and submit it. but then that owner operator has to actually submit the NOI, notice of intent, to DEC. So at that time, that's what will happen. But Sherman and I discussed was setting up the framework in the SWIP now, so that can happen at that point. So that was a lot of the discussion that we had, was just the mechanics of how this is gonna work, because it's not a normal situation. So we had to kind of come up with something that was gonna work, and everybody has to certify these things. So when you're certifying things, you want to make sure you know what you're certifying. So the best thing, the way to do that is at the pre-construction meeting with would be the owner and contractor's responsibility to take responsibility for the SWIP at that point. That's, because they're the ones that will actually be submitting the notice of intent. So,
Right, so if the frameworks would be in place, that would be general. And then.
well, the
each-
SWIP
each-
is pretty specific.
Well,
It's just
it's
the- it's just
specific,
the
but-
certifications in the end.
But what you're saying is that
Product.
each parcel that's being developed at that time,
Will have, because they have to take the SWIP and
Right.
put it to that parcel.
so that notice of intent, that specific, for that site should be tied into the permit,
Correct. That's correct.
For the building permit.
building permit for the town.
That's what Sherman and I had discussed. And that's when I came up with, well, let's have there should be a pre-construction meeting, so the building department in Rush and the contractor and the owner, everybody can get together and make sure all that happens at that point. Okay, otherwise, I've been in this business a long time. If he's issued a building permit, he's gonna go out there and start building. And there has to be some joint effort here to make sure the SWIP is in. Okay, so that's what I suggested, the pre-construction, and that is gonna be included in the SWIP, that it's required to do that. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen probably. Okay. Because that contractor at that point has to certify that he has read it and understands it, the SWIP. Okay, but that was one of the last remaining things that we had to work out.
So I'll take this a little bit out of order, but in line with exactly what you're saying, what Sherman Gittens had suggested is that we add two conditions to the approval.
Mhm.
And I'm going to read them and see if this is what
Okay.
sounds straight to you.
Okay,
Says the SWIP documentation shall be reviewed and approved by the town engineer as a condition of any building permits on any approved lots. This will require the building permit applicant for each lot to provide updated information to the town regarding their lot and may require additional information to be provided. So that was one condition.
Mhm.
The other condition is the owner of each lot shall schedule a pre-construction meeting with the town engineer and building inspector prior to any construction activity on the site. The contractors and any other representatives the owner of the lot wishes to be present will participate in the pre-construction meeting to review project-specific information and be informed of any concerns the town has prior to construction. Fees associated with the meeting, if any, will be charged to the owner of the project lot and will be required to be paid along with any other fees owed to the town prior to a certificate of occupancy. So I think that's consistent with what you said.
Mhm.
And this could be the best coordinated site plan and construction that we've ever had.
Well, that's a progress that you will see throughout.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Yep.
Good, thank you. We do have a few other pieces of information that are new and we should get right into the record. I will do that now. So this was let's see, an October 21st, 2022 letter from MRB to me, actually signed by Sherman Gittens. It says, MRB has completed a review of the submitted subdivision. I'll remind everybody that this is the 3-lot subdivision that he was talking about. And the site plan regarding the above referenced project received by the town of Rush on September 27, 2022. This subdivision and site plan were prepared by Daniel Cornwall, PE, Project Management. A brief written response to each comment should be provided by the design engineer, and I know you've done that. So these are the site plan general comments. Since the applicant has limited the subdivision of the property to 4 lots total with the development on 3 of the lots, that have a combined area of disturbance of less than 5 acres. We no longer believe that the proposed development is a type 1 action under seeker and may be an uncoordinated, unlisted action. This will only require a minimum of a short form environmental assessment form, which the applicant provided, dated September 27, 2022. Number 2. Feel free to sit down if you want, Daniel. Yeah. You're welcome to sit, whatever you're comfortable with. General note number 6 should include a discharge to splash blocks. Should include, quote, or discharge to splash blocks. I think what the general note says, it can be a dry well or discharge to splash blocks. And we're simply, I know you want to use dry wells, and that's perfectly acceptable and even beneficial. But we just wanted to follow what the general note says. And number 16 should denote that Monroe County Agricultural District is eastern rather than southeastern, as denoted on the plans. And aside, I believe that incorrect southeastern probably came from an old set of applications that you may have referred to. We've corrected that in our own application. Number 3, the applicant should denote the dimension of all driveways clearly on the site plans. The driveway surface should also be specified on the plans, and I think you've done that. The and in the letter that you did respond to. The remaining lands on the subdivision plan should have a notation stating that the lot is not approved for building. And I know you can do that if you haven't. There, and again, that comes right out of our town code. Number 5, there are some inconsistencies with the line type, line weight for the proposed contours in lot 10. Please review and revise to make sure that all lot lines are consistent throughout the site plans. And I think you've done that. Number 6, the lot number 3, lot area will need to be updated per the applicant's statement. This should be done prior to any conditional approval, and I think that's done. Number 7, it should be identified what will be done if there are spoils left over from the topsoil stockpile that cannot be utilized on the site to comply with section A125-8-B. No excess, quote, no excess topsoil or subsoil shall be removed from the site unless approved by the planning board, end quote, of the design criteria and construction specifications. And I think you've done that. Number 8, the proposed stabilized access road will need to be shown on the site plan sheet for erosion and sediment control. This should be adequately installed prior to mass site work to avoid any tracking onto local roadways. I think you've done that. Erosion, number 9, the erosion and sediment control sheet should have notification that clearly states the developer's intention not to have concrete trucks wash out on the site. This notation should clearly state that the developer will be solely responsible if the concrete debris from the truck is found on the roadways, roadside ditches, or any unauthorized location on or off site. Done that. There will need to be a notation, number 10, there will need to be a notation that the proposed dry wells will be sized to facilitate a minimum of a 10-year storm per section A125-14-.d of the design criteria and construction diagrams. And I think you've done that. Number 11, all SWIP information was submitted on October 2022. A review is forthcoming and will not be part of this comment letter. And that's the discussion we just had about SWIP and how it will be handled. So while we will probably have in the resolution that conditions of the town engineer will have to be met, I think you've done essentially all of that with the exception of the SWIP that we already had discussed. So I won't go through and read all your comments because we've already stated that you've completed them. Okay. When we get to the let's go through it. We can go through the short environmental assessment form that was provided. So I think hopefully you've got copies of it. So the only things I think worth noting, does number 2, does proposed action require a permit, approval, or funding from any other government agency? If yes, list the agency, and there's listed MCDO, Department of Health, Department of Public Health, and MC, Department of Transportation. The total acres for the site was listed as 16.46 with physical disturbance of 4.75, which is under the 5 limit. So that was a change, and that's beneficial. The only other one I want to note I'll take it back to one more after this. Number 12, does a site contain or is substantially contiguous to a building, archaeological site, or district which is listed on the National or State Register of Historic Places, or that has been determined by the Commissioner of the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation to be eligible for listing on the State Register of Historic Places? And that was filled out by the mapper as a yes. And momentarily, I will get to the SHPO letter, which addresses that. Okay. Number 17, will the proposed action create stormwater discharge either from point or non-point sources? And it's marked yes. Will stormwater discharges flow to adjacent property? Yes. And again, that's addressed with SWIP. And I think that's mostly just a matter of having point sources and having a slope to the property. And we'll address that.
There is no actual point sources, it's all non-point, it's all sheet flow
Okay,
off the site, so there's no point, but
okay.
there is minor,
Because you've addressed the point sources with dry wells.
Right.
Okay, either from point or non-point sources. Thank you.
Correct.
Okay, so this water discharges are addressed by SWIP, but let me read the Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation letter. This is actually sent to Supervisor Kusi, and it says, thank you for requesting comments of the Division for Historic Preservation of the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. We have reviewed and submitted materials in accordance with the New York State Historic Preservation Act of 1980. These comments are those of the Division for Historic Preservation and relate only to historic cultural resources. We have determined the Phase 1 archaeological survey report entitled Phase 1, 1A and 1B goes on and on for archaeological investigations of proposed Fieldstone Estates, Section 2, 7 lot, in fact, residential subdivision, Town of Rush, prepared by Powers Archaeology LLC in August 2022. No archaeological sites were identified by the survey. Therefore, it is the opinion of the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation that no properties, including archaeological and/or historic resources listed in or eligible for the New York State and National Registers of Historic Places, will be impacted by this project. So even though SHPO was, or I should say, archaeology was referenced in the automatic mapper, SHPO has said that's it's not a problem. And again, getting back to the SWIP, this was Sherman's response back to me as of yesterday. After talking with Dan Cornwall this morning regarding the SWIP document, I believe that we have an avenue to a final product that MRB can sign off on. And that again involves the pre-construction meetings we've talked about and recommending the following conditions of approval that I already read. Okay, with that, I believe I have read into the record all the information that we have and all the information that we need. At this point, I'm just going to ask if there's any comments, starting with the planning board members. Any comments or questions that you have relative to the 4-lot subdivision?
No, I have no comments or questions. I think everything's been adequately.
We've been at this for many months.
Yeah.
Not all active at every meeting, but it's been going on a long time. Okay. Robert, do you have anything?
I do not.
Okay, Jean?
No, thank you.
Anybody else from the audience or including on Zoom? If that's the case, then I move that we close the public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
Member Werzer?
Aye.
Member S?
Aye.
Chairman Schrock?
Aye. Okay, so normally if there's multiple public hearings, we would go through all the public hearings first and then cycle back to our deliberations and resolutions if that's appropriate. Since this is the only official legal public hearing that we have, I would like to continue and finish it right now. Okay,
Okay,
another chance for any input from our members? No? Let's go over the short environmental assessment form, the part 2 and part 3. Will the proposed action create a material conflict with an adopted land use or zoning regulations? No or small impact may occur, moderate to large impact may occur. I think it's no, agreed?
agreed.
Will the proposed action result in a change in the use or intensity of use of land? No or small impact? Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of the existing community? Think no. Will the proposed action have an impact on the environmental characteristic that cause the establishment of the critical environmental area, CEA? I think that's no, because we didn't have that. Will the proposed action result in an adverse change in existing level of traffic or affect existing infrastructure for mass transit, biking, or walkway? No or small impact. Agreed?
No.
Will the proposed action cause an increase in the use of energy and it fails to incorporate reasonably available energy conservation or renewable energy opportunities? No or small impact. Agreed?
Agreed.
Will the proposed action impact existing A, public or private water supplies? The answer is no, because there are none. Well, private. But not anybody, not other private ones. Public or private wastewater treatment utilities, no or small impact. Agreed?
Agreed.
Will the proposed action impair the character or quality of important historic, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources? I think we have the SHPO saying that's no.
Yep.
Okay. Will the proposed action result in any adverse change to natural resources? Example, wetlands, water bodies, groundwater, air quality, flora, or fauna? No or small impact may occur. Agreed? Okay. Will the proposed action result in an increase in the potential for erosion, flooding, or drainage problems? I think with SWIP, we'll say no or small, right?
Correct.
Okay. Will the proposed action create a hazard to environmental resources or human health? I think it's no or small impact, okay? All right, so part 3, for every question of part 2 that was answered, moderate to large impact, we need to explain why, and there were none. But I have added the comments that the EAF mapper indicated potential archaeological concerns, but an August 30, 2022 letter from SHPO stated no impact. Secondly, a water discharge from point sources downspouts has been resolved with dry wells and other provisions in the SWIP. So check this box if you have determined, based on information and analysis above and any supporting documentation, that the proposed action will not result in any adverse environmental impacts. Agreed?
I don't know if it's worth noting, you say a SHPO made the determination, but they also based it on the study
Okay,
that was done. And I don't know if that's necessary to add or not, but
I can do it.
because SHPO didn't make the determination on its own.
Let me just have a look at what that study was. By Powers Archaeology LLC.
Thank you.
Now you made me spell archaeology. Okay. That's for Val. Records. At this point, I think we're ready for some resolutions. We actually have 3, one for seeker separately, one for subdivision, and one for site plan. So I get to read these all. Fieldstone Estates Seeker Resolution, October 25, 2022. Whereas the planning board of the town of Rush has examined application 2022
Scott, sorry to interrupt you, November 15th, not October 25.
Oh, of course. I admit to focus on reading rather than content.
That's what we're here for.
Start again. Fieldstone Estates Secret Resolution, November 15, 2022. Whereas the planning board of the town of Rush has examined application 2022-06P submitted by Daniel Cornwall, PE, parentheses, the applicant of 958 Martin Road, West Henrietta, New York, 14586, requesting subdivision approval and site plan approval for 3 lots, parentheses, the action on property located at the southeast corner of Rush Henrietta Town Line Road and East River Road, parcel number 201.03-1-1.1, parentheses, the property. And whereas the planning board has determined that is the most appropriate agency for making the determination of significance thereon under the secret regulations, as the environmental, economic, and social impacts are primarily local in nature, and is therefore the appropriate lead agency to conduct an environmental review of the actions. And whereas the applicant submitted a short form environmental assessment form, parentheses, EAF, and the planning board has now completed its review of the EAF. And whereas the planning board has determined that the proposed action is classified as an unlisted action under Part 617 of the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act regulations, parentheses, seeker. And whereas the planning board has given consideration to the criteria for determining significance as set forth under seeker and the information contained in Part 2 of the EAF, now therefore be it resolved by the planning board of the town of Rush that in accordance with seeker, the planning board hereby designates itself as lead agencies for the proposed action identified herein. And it is further resolved that the planning board has reasonably concluded that when compared against the criteria set forth in Part 617 of seeker, and based upon the information and analysis recited in parts 1 and 2 of the EAF, the proposed action will not result in any significant adverse environmental impacts. And it is further resolved that the planning board does hereby make a determination of non-significance on the proposed action, and thus issues a negative declaration for the action and authorizes the planning board chairman to execute Part 3 of the EAF according to such determination. Valerie, would you poll the members?
Member Worcester.
Aye.
Member Est.
Aye.
Chairman Strong.
Aye. That's carried. Fieldstone Estates Subdivision Approval Resolution, November 15, 2022, resolution for subdivision approval. Whereas the planning board of the town of Rush, parentheses, the planning board has examined application 2022-06P submitted by Daniel Cornwall, PE, parentheses, the applicant of 958 Martin Road, West Henrietta, New York, 14586, requesting a 3-lot subdivision, parentheses, the proposed subdivision of property located at the southeast corner of Rush Henrietta Town Line Road and East River Road, parcel number 201.03-1-1.1, parentheses, the property. And whereas the planning board has examined the application maps and other materials filed with the application, including the environmental assessment form, the EAF, and all having reviewed all current site plans, building plans, environmental plans, and reports, comments, and reports from the town professional staff, the public, and other interested and involved agencies associated with the application, including Monroe County Planning and Development. And whereas a public hearing on the application was held on July 26, 2022, and November 15, 2022, and the notice was posted as required by law. And whereas all persons at the hearing desiring to speak on the matter were heard, all correspondence on the matter was read, and all comments and statements that were received during the public hearing and or at the duly held meetings of the planning board were considered by the planning board. And now therefore be it resolved that in accordance with the requirements of New York Town Law and Chapter 100 of the Code of the Town of Rush, the planning board grants preliminary approval of the proposed subdivision subject to the following conditions. The applicant shall meet all requirements of the town engineer as indicated in the town engineer's letter dated June 28, 2022, and updated in a letter dated October 21, 2022. Number 2, the applicant shall obtain approval of Monroe County Department of Health and Monroe County Department of Transportation and obtain signatures of those agencies on the final site plans. That should say subdivision plans or site plans in this case?
Subdivision plans, I think you're right.
The applicant, number 3, the applicant shall obtain approval signatures of the town engineer and the Rush Planning Board chairman. Number 4, the applicant shall obtain all other necessary local, state, and federal permits and approvals required for the project. It is further resolved that upon the applicant complying with all the conditions of preliminary approval, the planning board hereby waives final subdivision approval pursuant to section 100-27 of the code of the town of Rush. Would you take a roll call, Valerie?
Member Worcester,
Aye.
Member Ast,
Aye.
and Chairman Scott.
Aye, that's carried. Last one is Fieldstone Estates Site Plan Approval Resolution, November 15, 2022. Resolution for site plan approval. Whereas the planning board of the town of Rush has examined application 2022-06P submitted by Daniel Cornwall, PE, in parentheses, the applicant of 958 Martin Road, West Henrietta, New York, 14586, requesting site plan approval for 3 lots on property located at the southeast corner of Rush Henrietta Town Line Road and East River Road, parcel number 201-03, I'm sorry, 0.03-1-1.1, parentheses, the property. And whereas the planning board has examined the application, maps, and other materials filed with the application, including the environmental assessment form, and all having reviewed all current plans and reports, including comments and reports from town professional staff, the public, and other interested and involved agencies associated with the application, including Monroe County Planning and Development. And whereas a public hearing on the application was held on July 26, 2022, and November 15, 2022. Notice was posted as required by law, and whereas all persons at the hearing desiring to speak on the matter were heard, all correspondence on the matter was read, and all comments and statements that were received during the public hearing and or at the duly held meetings of the planning board were considered by the planning board. And now therefore be it resolved that upon consideration by the planning board, the factors set forth under section 120-69B3 of the town zoning law, including location, arrangement of buildings on the property, adequacy, type, and arrangement of trees, shrubs, and other landscaping constituting a buffer between this and adjoining lands, adequacy of separate disposal of stormwater and sanitary waste, and protection of adjacent properties, the planning board grants site plan approval, and it is further resolved that site plan approval is granted subject to the following conditions. Number 1, the applicant shall meet all requirements of the town engineer as indicated in the town engineer's letter dated June 28, 2022, as updated in a letter dated October 21, 2022. Number 2, no work is to commence until the applicant obtains a building permit from the town of Rush. Number 3, the applicant must meet any other applicable town building and inspection requirements. 4, the applicant shall obtain approval of Monroe County Department of Health and Monroe County Department of Transportation and obtain signatures of those agencies on the final site plans. 3, the applicant shall obtain approval signatures of the town engineer and the Rush Planning Board chairman. Number 4. I'm sorry, that was 5. This is 6. Number 6, the applicant shall obtain all other necessary local, state, and federal permits and approvals required for the project. Number 7, I read this before. The SWIP documentation shall be reviewed and approved by the town engineer as a condition of any building permits or any approved lots, on any approved lots. This will require the building permit applicant for each lot to provide updated information to the town regarding their lot and may require additional information to be provided. Number 8, the owner of each lot shall schedule a pre-construction meeting with the town engineer and building inspector prior to any construction activity on the site. The contractors and any other representatives the owner of the lot wishes to be present will participate in the pre-construction meeting to review project-specific information and be informed of any concerns the town has prior to construction. Fees associated with the meeting, if any, will be charged to the owner of the project lot and will be required to be paid along with any other fees owed to the town prior to a certificate of occupancy. Roll call, please.
Member Worcester.
Aye.
Member Ast,
Aye.
and Chairman Scott.
Aye. Also carried. Congratulations, Daniel. It's been a long time. But it worked out.
Patience is a virtue.
Okay, Valerie, do you want these copies where I've changed the dates? Would that be helpful to you?
Yes. Thank you.
I can get copies of those, if I'll need those. to
She'll be sending those to you probably in the morning, I would guess. So you have digital copies, right?
I have not received any.
You don't have digital ones. Okay. I'll send you digital ones.
I just need them
That's-
to forward to DOH and DOT. They need to see those before they'll act on.
Okay, yeah, I'm not, is that something, I mean, it's routine that we send copies digitally typically to the applicant, right?
Is digital okay for you,
Oh, yeah.
or do you need a paper?
No, digital's fine.
Usually I have to
I'd rather. have
put it
digital.
on letterhead and.
Yeah, yeah, we had that problem before. It needs to be on letterhead.
Yes, that's fine. But digital's great. I think digital better than paper every day. Right?
Tomorrow or Thursday, does that work?
Then let me keep these then, so I can make the changes on the digital copies.
Pretty much.
Good night.
Safe driving out there.
Yes.
The next item is informal review. Valerie, you wanna read that as well? This is not a public hearing. This is a process we don't go through more than maybe once or twice a year, maybe not even that sometimes. But we'll describe it a little bit more after we get into it here.
Informal review 2022-10P, 173 Schofield Road by Jack Burke, currently living on 18.7 acres and would like to subdivide the property to include 1 to 2 acre building and keep 16.7 acres with their current home. In addition, he would like to build approximately 1,500 to 1,700 square foot home on the 2 acres.
Yeah, so I think that middle phrase there really is 1 to 2 acre, so what you'd like to split off the subdivision. So this really involves a question both about a subdivision and a site plan. A little bit more about informal reviews. As I said, this is not a process we do often. We had been working for probably the better part of a year on an informal application or informal review application. And we had one. Valerie and I actually used what the planning board had previously discussed and more or less approved and came up with a bit of a simplified consolidated version. And that is what Mr. Jack Burke has used to make this application for the informal review. So we want to be later on talking about the application itself as well as the project that you'd like to talk about. So Jack, if you want, you can come up here or sit up to the front, or you can talk loudly. We have your diagrams, your map, and tell us what you'd like to do.
So we moved over to Schofield Road, 2019. Prior to that, I lived over in Wheatland, and I built a home over there, so I had to go through a wetland delineation process, so I was kind of familiar with all that. So I know we have wetlands on our 18.7 acres. So I went over to DEC and filed a request for a wetland delineation, sat with Jenny Landry over there, and did that on October 6, 2022. And she said it would take about 2 weeks or so to get to it, which I was pleasantly surprised that she could get to it that quick. Well, it didn't work out as she thought. I think she was on some sort of medical leave. And I finally called in, said, look, I got a meeting with the town. It's informal, but I just really would like to have that answer done before, but they couldn't get to me. So it's actually scheduled for tomorrow at 1:30. Close. So, basically, we have a wooded section on the west side of our property. We're just looking at, I put on the site map here, couple of different options we're looking at. We do know from past experience that once the wetlands delineated, we have to have a 100-foot buffer from that site. So I do believe they offer some options where you can put your roadway can go within that buffer, but, you know, hopefully we don't have to deal with that. It'd probably be more like option 2, if you look at the drawing, so we're clearly away from it. I don't want to disrupt what we feel the beauty of the lot and Scoville Road itself. So kind of try to hide ourselves in that wooded area, and so it doesn't be too much detriment to the neighborhood.
Okay, so when you talked about a wooded area, is that the delineation there? Is that what that is?
Yeah, where it goes up.
So this is what you're just calling the wooded area.
Yeah, basically where all that tree line is outlined.
Yeah.
Right along goes parallel with the road, goes up to what was a driveway at one time when we first moved in there, and it follows all the way back south. So it'll be relatively close to the road, you know, somewhere like 200 feet back, maybe. Our house now is closer to like 500 feet back now. So that's kind of what we're doing.
Okay,
House is a little bit too big for us. Too much stairs, trying to think down the road that not getting any younger, so we have a home in Florida that would probably pretty much be there 6 months, almost like a 6-month split. And we love that we have a ranch down there, and so that's what we want to duplicate up here.
okay. Yeah, again, feel free to sit down. This certainly is not an interrogation.
Okay.
So just a few things. We know that Schofield is a town road. And on town roads, you have to have a 100-foot setback from the center line of the road. That's probably not an issue for you. Right? So there's a number of so-called bulk requirements like that would have to be met. R30, you've got 25-foot side and rear setbacks. That's probably not a problem for you either from your lot line. The town code says in an R30 district, the main building with the residence has to be a minimum of 1,200 square feet. I think you're thinking of something larger than that.
Mhm.
We talked about site distances before. There's a little bit of a curvature in the road there, so I would guess that lot option 2, if you've shown, which may be better for wetlands or not as wet as the lot 1. But I think probably the closer you are to the bend in that road, the better you are for the driveway with site distances in either direction. You're probably much more of an expert in that than me, Carl, but
Yeah.
it's probably not an issue there.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got wetlands, you have concerns for septic and perk tests, and you're well aware of that type of thing. So I think just in order of full transparency, I have talked with Jack before. He actually came to our property and looked me up when I was outside working. So we had a bit of a discussion previously. That's actually a kind of funny story. My wife said, well, here's the golf cart. Why don't you go down and find Scott? So I met up with this guy driving my golf cart. But anyway, no problem.
Weird.
You have town water there, I presume, on Schofield?
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah, so in addition to, your perk test, which we talked about, you want to get early, so you're not surprised and know that it works. Town water, I would presume, is not a problem, but you'd need approval for that. The biggest concern that I had, and you've already talked about, was the wetlands. As I looked up on the county's mapping system, what do they call it, GIS, or global, whatever it is, information system.
Geographical information system.
Just a question on, first of all, on this map, isn't north that way?
North is always face up on a map, yeah.
But this shows north being, I don't know if it's that way or that way. It indicates north. I think north is directly north, straight up on this map. So I think this is wrong.
Yeah.
That was
It's definitely not north. It's kind of, the lot is kind of tilted a little bit.
what it is.
You're right. I don't see
But I
north-
think-
I don't see north being that.
I think as the map shows this, and as the county map showed, north was straight up.
Google Maps is showing it straight up.
Yeah, so I think that's wrong. Not that it matters much. But that's land tech. It's And that's John Sharaba, but they're not located in Ladder Road anymore, I don't think. Anyway, the county GIS actually shows a stream coming out of the pond on this property here. It shows a stream which I tried to trace, was best I could do, just in taking a few crude measurements, and it looks like the stream that they show, which I think the official term is ephemeral, or whatever the term is, intermittent, or it's rare, it doesn't happen often,
Mhm.
but it does show a stream running roughly through where you showed your option one house.
Oh, does it?
It does. You can come up and take a look at it if you want to. It's not a well-done map, so here's your lot. Okay, you got the original there.
That's right.
And so the option one and option two, and so here's this, see this little light colored thing here coming up here?
Mhm.
It runs all the way up to Honeywell Creek up here.
Mhm.
So I'd really be concerned about that and what the DEC will end up coming back and telling you.
Let's see here, your house is here. So it's showing crossing over the road into the pond and then,
Hadn't even noticed it continues through the pond. Yeah.
yeah, it looks like that it ends there.
So you know, you said there's a culvert
Or starts
under the
there.
road.
That's
So
what
There's a
I-
culvert
I-
somewhere under the road.
I think this map is indicating that's potentially even a stream. And then I don't know what our cutoff is for something that's intermittent, but we talked previously about townwide drainage district, right? And having to give an easement 20 feet on either side of the banks of such a stream. But I know, I mean, I've driven by there. Again, full disclosure, I drive by there several times a year in my tractor. My daughter lives in Mendon, and Jack's house is about 3/4 of the way to my daughter's house in Mendon.
Mhm.
Yeah, it does depend on how it's classified,
Yeah,
with DEC being intermittent. I know I lived over on West Rush Road for a while and had a similar situation, culvert crossing, but it didn't run all the time, so it's still a waterway, a drainage way that
Won't they delineate that though, when they do that?
they may or may not, because they're focused on the wetlands, and being a dry year, they're gonna depend more on soil types and
vegetation.
vegetation,
Yeah.
yeah. And evidence of where things have been, so.
Yeah, I will add my bias, and that is that there are a couple homes near me. I live on Works Road, as you know, and over on the other side of the hill, so closer to you. There were two houses built down in the lower area there. One, when they had the foundation in, they had a kind of wet period, and literally the foundation filled up almost to the top with water. So that house ended up putting in 2 sump pumps just to keep up with the water. And there's one further down the road near Phelps, which is even worse. They literally have cattails in their front yard. It was approved by the planning board. They went through all the seeker environmental stuff. They were approved, but I know that person near Phelps constantly has a sump pump running. And there's almost no time of the year that they don't have water in the ditch in front of their house with cattails growing in a lot of it. And as part of their property, they can't mow because of cattails in the front of their house right along Works Road. So it's nothing, you don't want to build in a low area. It just won't be fun because you can't survive a power outage without some pumps. You have to have backups and that sort of thing. So I'm not saying your property's like that. I just suggest you be aware of it.
Mhm.
Not a engineer here, just a lawyer looking at Google Maps. Google Maps shows that river or stream from the pond going all the way to Honeywell Creek.
Yep, it does.
Yeah, on street view, there's just so much
Yeah, you can't tell.
vegetation, you can't
Yeah,
see
I was just
the
looking
culvert
at it as well.
crossing either.
Is it a pond that somebody created at some point, or?
I don't know, it was there when we were there, but I do know it does feed into Honeywell Creek. So that's why the DEC is all over that pond. They won't let you touch anything. Like,
Yeah.
I can't walk on tails, I can't do anything to it. So,
And it'd be interesting to know the history, and whether that was a low spot that was enlarged,
Made itself a pond or somebody made it.
or
a
someone
pond.
made a pond to
Yeah.
reduce the wetland area, possibly.
Well, I mean, welcome comments of the other members here. Typically, without the wetland issue here and the stream issue, this would be fairly straightforward. You know, you're breaking off a big enough property, it's a reasonable shape, it's got road frontage, you have the room for all the setbacks. That would be my primary concern is the wetlands, which you're already aware of.
mhm.
Um,
I'm anxious to see where it comes out,
yeah.
you know.
You may be surprised, either way. I will say that one thing that because I know you're interested in understanding more about the process. Clearly, you can't get through site plans and subdivisions without hiring professionals. You know, it's a pretty big deal. So that's a substantial cost. You do pay our own town engineering charges, which they charge up to $200 an hour. So that can add up pretty quickly. The fees themselves are not that great for the permits, for the applications, I should say. We recently put our subdivision and site plan application on the Rushtown website. So it's available to you or anybody else, and you can actually get those applications and take a look at what's required to fill them out. I think you'll get a better appreciation of the requirements. So I would recommend just looking at the application at least, and it's one application form that is used both for site plans and subdivisions. But as you heard tonight, what you would need is both a subdivision application and a site plan application. And you'd have to do both and have both approved and pay both fees.
So they can do them simultaneously.
Yeah, as we did tonight.
Yeah.
They're very closely related. It doesn't make sense to do them separately I mean, it happens that people want to subdivide, like if you had an interest in selling off your lot you want to subdivide, then you would just do the subdivision and it'd be somebody else's problem for a site plan.
Sure.
But clearly in your case, you want to build a house, so that involves both steps.
And, you know, I'm familiar with the building, all the processes, because I've been in construction for 40 years.
Yeah.
Plus, I built my own house in 2005 over at Scottsdale, so I know about the planning board approvals and site plans.
Building
I didn't
permits.
have to get a subdivision because I bought the lot over there. But I didn't at one time subdivide that lot into two pieces prior to me selling it. And that was a lot of work just to get it subdivided down the middle. So
It is.
I remember having to pay lawyer fees or engineering fees, so when I did that. So that was kind of new to me.
Yeah, I mean, so different towns would have different fee structures. The bigger towns have their own in-house engineers and they're on the town payroll. So in cases like that, either it's other town residents subsidizing the applicants or it's built into the fees of the application, right? So we don't have anywhere near that size and we have to hire the engineering services and it's billed separately. If it ends up that's a stream and either way, I would say either way, if that's ruled to be a stream and it's either on the lot you want to build on or on the remaining lands which have the other house on it, you would still be required to have the townwide drainage district easement filled out. So the logic behind that is, again, that's if it's a stream. The town has a need to make sure that parts of the town don't flood. And sometimes with trees falling down or other residents taking action, it's been determined that the town wants permission to enter people's property and clean out streams that are blocked up. The only way the town really has to do that is to wait until somebody is asking for a site plan or a subdivision, at which case we have leverage to say, okay, if you want those things, you have to agree to a townwide drainage easement. And you have to essentially give the town permission to access your property for 20 feet on either side of the stream to clear up anything that's plugged up and causing flooding. So that's the way that works, and we don't really have a choice in that either. Not all towns would require that. But it can be a complication, and that gets close to needing a lawyer on your part to come up with the easement and get it registered for the county. You guys got anything else?
Actually have an extra copy of the subdivision and site plan application. If I can-
It looks like from the mapping I'm seeing, that's stream, that waterway, or the channel, whatever, is within the wetland delineation area that it shows on the map. So more than likely, you will be discussing that tomorrow.
Yeah, I can't believe that it wouldn't be.
Right.
'Cause
So
they're
you'll-
well
you'll-
aware of it, so.
Yeah. You'll get more information from DEC on that. I think, just reiterate what Scott was saying, that obviously the most western part of your northwestern part of the property appears to be wetland, stream, difficulties. So, yeah, it looks like that within that, if you're able to just do your homework and get as much information as you can on the site characteristics and you know enough from construction on.
Yeah, I won't have a sump on problem with it. We'll be put the basement in.
Yeah, so I know you're thinking of a pole and, what would you call it, pole and truss kind of pole barn type of construction?
Well, I mean, that was one of the options we
Yeah.
discussed, like a barnuminium, they call them.
Yeah,
You know, so
yeah,
but we're not sure. what we're gonna do
so
yet.
I don't know that that's a problem in Rush, but John Limbeck, our building inspector, would know more. I would think there are insulation requirements where you have to insulate down a certain number of feet, whether you have a basement or not. And that can be as simple maybe as styrofoam in the ground or something, but you ought to understand that too. You may know more about that than I do.
Their crawl space type of situation or a slab on grade, obviously. Just make sure you, if that's engineered.
Well, maybe just required, you can just go down 4 foot for a perimeter footing all the way around too, and then we would insulate that.
Like a monolithic slab where they. dig
Yeah,
out the
I call it a hunch footer, but
Yeah.
it's deeper on your perimeter.
Yeah,
And then you insulate that.
then you can put
I
radiant.
want to put in floor heating in the floor
Exactly.
as well, so
That's what I have at my
I want to make
house.
sure that that's gonna be insulated.
It's awesome. That heat's awesome.
Do you have any other questions, Jack?
No, like I said, I think probably option 2 is probably gonna be the better fit, because I'll be clearly away from everything. So originally I thought I was going to ask a question, on option 1 is, it says 150 foot of right frontage you have to have.
I think on a town road is only 100 feet.
All right, so
Not town, it is a town road. Yeah, Schofield is a town road.
is it?
I'm pretty sure.
Well,
Well,
I've been in my, I said it's 150, but whatever.
Okay.
I got that. I was just wondering, just for my knowledge, if you have wetlands and that frontage, does that still count as part of your 150
I
foot?
believe it does.
I don't think I'm gonna get to that point, but.
Yeah. Okay. All right,
I don't know
no charge for this one.
Nice meeting you.
Oh, by the way, relative to the form, any comments on it? Was the parts of it hard to fill out? Were parts of it didn't make sense?
I think the only thing, if I remember right, down the first page, that I wasn't able to click the boxes. Where.
That's probably
what I'm
right.
Requesting for.
Right, so,
So it might be just a function of how you
Okay.
set that up. And I mean, it would be nice if you could just electronically sign it. For people who don't have a printer. I mean, I do, but
Mhm.
sometimes the printer, as we all know, is always out of ink.
Okay, so is that why you didn't check any of those?
Yeah. I think
Okay.
I highlighted it. because
Okay,
like back
I
in
see
there,
what you did. Okay,
I'm putting
Okay.
bold.
okay. And
Radio box.
you also didn't write in R30, you just put residential. So that's not a hardship. I mean, with the address, we can figure that out pretty quickly, but I'm wondering if we shouldn't be doing something there to indicate that we really want which type of residential.
So what I would know, how would I know being that's R30?
Well, that's why it says see www.townofrush.com, how do I zoning map? Okay, so that there was the directions in parentheses right under that.
Could we put check boxes, R30?
Yeah, we could do that.
You know,
We could do that.
Yeah, that'd be.
Yeah,
Trying to improve our process, but you're a test subject.
see, now you're helping us. You see, this really isn't free.
Does that make my fees get waived then?
Unfortunately.
Come on, Scott, we can work out a deal.
well, we are looking for another member on the board.
Well, one thing, I joked with Scott when we were first talking, I appreciate the board sitting at the same level as the applicant. It's just an observation. Go to Scottsdale, they sit up here. And you sit
I hadn't thought of that. Could we raise this up?
here. It's reeks wrong.
Yeah, yeah, good
A
point,
million ways when you walk in.
good point. Okay. You had asked also about, do we recommend engineering companies, surveying companies? And I said the answer was no, we can't. But I noticed this was done by Land Tech. And
That was, when we bought the house, that's just the site.
well, that's my point. So they've already got this in their system. And so I'm not recommending Land Tech, but I'm just saying,
Right.
if it were me,
And
I'd be
you got most of
considering
like
going
the-
back to the same company who already has the map.
Right.
But as long as they get the direction right.
Sharaba,
Yeah, I think that's John Sharaba.
that's a good guy.
He ought to know which way north is. That's not a recommendation. I'm just saying
Understood.
it's logical.
When I was at my job, I couldn't make recommendations.
Anything else?
Jack, you were back at the Kingsbury days, right? We talked many times. I was coming from Armfire.
Did you ever come to Kingsbury?
I was that close and they grabbed to keep me at Armfire.
Yes, that's your-
A
Yeah,
long
I'm
time.
sure we talked.
Yeah, we did lots.
All right,
Interesting times.
so you're welcome to stay and see what else we do, but
No, I'm good.
or you can go out and brave the weather now.
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Take it easy.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Take care.
John.
Okay, moving on, actually, you're doing pretty good. Moving on to old business. You remember the Federal Communications Commission, Section 6409 telecom tower? We wrote a bit of a facetious resolution at our last meeting and passed it on to, wanted to pass it on to the town board, suggesting that we no longer as a planning board be involved in those select requested changes that fit certain criteria, that they instead would be handled by the town engineer and the building inspector, because we have to approve them anyway, is what it amounts to. And it was just a timeline problem for us. That was presented at a November 7 workshop, I believe. Is that correct? And was there a determination of how
Yes,
the
and
town would
at the
proceed?
last town board meeting, we did talk about it and we moved it forward. We have now set a public hearing
Okay,
for December 14th at the town board.
I don't know if you ever saw it after I put it together. I don't know if I sent it your way, but do you want to take, I brought 2 copies if you wanted to take a quick look at it.
so this requires a town law to modify the telecommunications tower section
Yes,
of the code.
If you're
And so we
curious.
have to set a public hearing.
Is that 120-64?
It's the
it is.
process.
That's
before we
Not the
can
point
take it.
one.
Not the point one.
Yes. This is the local law, if you're interested in it. So you'll see if you turn the second page, you see the definitions, and if you turn again to the third page, you'll see I added the definition. That definition being, yeah, so that's the second page, that's all, but that's like, when you start the local law, that local law, you'll see all the definitions.
Oh, okay.
And
Shall be
then,
amended, okay.
yeah, and then if you flip the page again, you'll see in italics is where I've made my changes. So I added a definition for eligible facilities requests, which refers back to the federal statute. And then at the very bottom of that page, you'll see exceptions H, the following are accepted from the provisions of this section. And if you flip the page again, you'll see I added added an exception for eligible facilities requests. And I also wrote, I can't remember offhand, but I wrote in that paragraph that it's only accepted from the requirements of obtaining a special use permit and site plan.
Okay,
Just to avoid that process.
okay, super.
So a copy of that will be posted on the website if it hasn't already, and it'll be come up for a public hearing, and then after that, the town board may or may not vote on it that night. But it's moving forward.
Super. There were,
Thank you.
there were many years in the past when this would have gone into a rabbit hole, never heard of it again. So this board does a lot better. Well, thanks for that.
But I think we're all.
We're all
working towards the
doing,
same
we're all
goal,
together. Okay, excellent. Moving on, accessory apartment code update. So we know that's continuing. Robert has written the code, I believe. Is that scheduled for any particular time with the town board?
I don't know. I reached out to Amber and Jerry, and Gina can send you this email as well, but I sent sort of a list of local laws and where we were with all of them. And that was one of the ones that there has been a draft, and I don't know if the public hearing has been set yet, but I assume that will be done soon if it can move forward, so.
Okay,
Okay, I'll make a note.
Yeah.
The draft, we have the draft on that.
Yeah.
On the accessory apartments.
And we have, as you just referenced, Scott, you know, we have, I don't know, I think I had 8 or 9 local laws on our list. So it's tough to keep track of them all.
I know,
And so like I said, I put together a list so that
that's,
these are where we
Right.
are. So
and
some
you
of
did,
them-
and you sent that to the supervisor.
Yeah. So hopefully, I mean, we've been on top of it, I think pretty well. But there's some that are in workshops still, they're all different stages, so.
Right.
But yeah, this one's moving forward as well.
okay, super.
I'll forward that to you right now.
Thank you.
Next one is agreement to updated subdivision and site plan application. So it's not that much updated, but actually we did make a few additional changes to be a little bit more rigorous around the sign-offs. And my co-members here don't have much experience with sign-offs, but that has tended to be a problem. That particularly when you get one specific example, you get to applications that have a required easement, whether that be a driveway easement or our famous townwide drainage easement. I think in the past, those have been mostly a wink and a nod and have not really been submitted and registered by the county. So we've built in some steps to do that kind of thing, as well as built in some steps that we want the town clerk to tell us before I sign off that all the fees, particularly engineering fees up to that point, have been paid. So we don't get anybody holding back on paying their required fees. So those are the types of things that were added, but the the very last and approved by the town board application for both the subdivision and site plan, that one document, is now on the town website. Okay, and I think I sent a note to you folks, and I said there's two ways to get there, one through the document center on the left of the homepage, and the other one is through government at the top of the homepage. Either way, you can get to a hyperlink where you can download that form. So it is there. I encourage you to figure out how to find it. And I think it's just wonderful to be able to not only tell applicants that it's there, but even for me to go back and look at what is the latest and greatest and the form that's in use currently. Remember that about a year ago, we had the last 15 or so pages chopped off our 20-page application and nobody knew about it. And that went on for a better part of a year. So now it's there, it's available for all to see, and I just love that idea. But anyway, I would like to talk about, first of all, that you agree that it's a good thing to have it available on the website. And I've certainly given my opinion, but also talk about what other applications and documents we would like to put on the website. I would refer you to look at the building inspector's page, and he's got a whole host of documents there for different permits and instruction forms. So the things I would propose adding are our other primary application is special permit application. The one we just talked about tonight, which we can continue to improve, informal review application. We've had questions in the recent past about where do I get townwide drainage easement, district easement forms? So there's no reason we couldn't put that on. Rarely used, but nice place to store it is the accessory apartment affidavit. And then there's a question of the current fee schedule. I know John Limbeck in his building department section does have the a link to the town fee schedule. I would like to have something of at least a planning board fees, just that section of the town board's fee schedule that applies to the planning board in our document section as well. So what do you think? A good place to put things, and what things would you like to put there?
I agree that having forms and available in a
Payment schedule sounds good. That sounds good.
it's just
I don't see any downside, frankly.
No.
There was discussion earlier, and I know some folks had resisted it because they think that people will download forms, keep them stored in hard copy, and use obsolete ones. Well, guess what? They can easily obtain hard copies from the town clerk and keep those as well. And we have ample evidence of people doing that over the course of years, rather than coming to the town and getting a new hard copy. So this way it's available to anybody, 99% of people now can go on the internet and get it.
right. And I think we talked about this before. In the footer, there should be at least
A date, yeah.
a date, a form number.
A revision, something, yeah,
I think Valerie has added that.
definitely like a revision or something.
Yeah, the informal application we just saw has that at the bottom.
Gone to that. And
Yeah,
so
our-
that's the will update.
The title of our application form actually does state, what is October?
That was the
2022.
latest update.
So I don't think we put the day, but we put the month. And it's right in the form, right in the title of the form itself.
Yeah.
But yes, absolutely.
So what other, if I may, what other forms while somebody is going through these processes do we come across that would be useful? I mean, tonight we talked about seeker. So would a seeker form be something that somebody may need to use?
Which form?
The seeker?
Yeah,
Seeker?
probably.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a very good question. Clearly, they're available on the state website. Another example is the agricultural data sheet that's available on the county website. So the question is, should we duplicate them? And I'll bet some towns do, and some towns will say maybe just have, or maybe you have a document that says other forms and it tells you where to find them on the other websites. I don't know. That's a good question.
I wouldn't duplicate. I know if I had to go for a New York State DOT permit or where to look for those, so I think it's what we control, we should post.
But we
can
should
post.
have what has to do with our town and not what's coming across from other areas.
Right.
of the
I mean, we
state.
could have a link or something eventually, but I wouldn't post a form.
That's my
Okay,
opinion
don't you
too.
have links to other areas, other sources, other forms that you may need as part of your process? Not necessarily any forms, but a link to get them. And I don't know if it's any of the ones that we just described.
You
Yeah.
mean like in the main application?
Yes,
or
yes.
was
So
a
it'd be,
bunch of
it'd be a
links?
short seeker form, a long seeker form, and the ag data sheet would be the three that I could think of. But I agree with Carl. Don't get ourselves into maintaining something that we don't create.
Okay. Is there anything else that we do that I haven't come across that would be used?
Anything other than what Scott has mentioned?
So
I
special
had a
permit,
couple lists, yeah.
special permit and formal application, townwise drainage district easement, accessory apartment affidavit, and current fee schedule. Even the fee schedule gets a bit iffy because we don't create it. And we have to remember to change that. Of course, we have fees in the application forms as well. So all those have to be updated every time the fee schedule changes.
But that's that's set annually,
Here
so
and
we
there.
could just post that as.
Yeah, and we know when it
2022.
happens.
Right.
Yeah. I can't think of anything else. Maybe we will in the future. So I would say,
List of what
I wrote down.
they
what
want, you
was
wrote it
shared.
down, okay, so you're gonna work. on
yeah,
that.
you're copied on the email I sent out.
The only thing I'd like to do is just have maybe you or just make sure that what I have
Is it
that's
current?
going to go on there is what you want.
I'd certainly be willing to look at it.
Okay, I'll send you
Because I
copies.
don't know that I know what's current either. And that gets back to the fundamental problem that we've had. There's no such thing as the official copy that anybody really
And
knows.
then what Mr. Burke was saying is, talking about he couldn't check on there because I had Word documents that he was given, but if it was in PDF form, and I don't know a ton about computers, but if it's PDF.
Well,
then
that's
can you go
another-
in there and
That,
check?
that's another
Instead
good
of-
question. It's really, you could argue that PDF versions are better as the official online version, so people can only change what you want them to be able to click on, right, or check. But you don't want them taking a Word document and enable editing and changing
Right.
something. So it really should be unchangeable, except for the checkboxes. type of
If we
thing.
could generate a PDF that has the ability to fill in fields.
Are you able to do that?
I can make a doc in a PDF, but I don't know if it is changeable.
Right. You may only have a reader version and you may not
Yeah.
have
We
a
we
full.
only have a very basic, we don't have the kinds that do that stuff.
Okay.
Unless anybody else has. that capability.
Either way, I'd go with a PDF that can't be changed.
Okay.
Good. Enough on that. So we'll cycle back to that next meetings. Okay, so we already talked about the, on the new business, the informal review application. I presume, have you all had a chance to look at that new form that we gave to Jack Burke? You don't have a copy of that?
I do. I
Okay.
laid that left at home.
Okay, no problem.
My
Would you like
packet.
me to make a quick copy? So you can see?
Well, I think, why don't, that's something I view as it's internal. We don't need town board approval because it's an informal document. So we could go ahead and put what we have on the website. Maybe you want to, again, try what we said, zoning district, put in boxes for R20, R30. Probably got to put in RMD, C and LI. I think those are the only ones we really use.
Okay.
So give that a try and then feed it back to me.
Well, Scott, did you want a copy of this?
Yeah, please. I could.
So I printed it off, so Scott, I figured Scott would have an interest in looking at that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go back and take a look at the form, not in light of our
Yep.
discussion and if there's anything we could add.
Yeah, I mean, essentially what happened, we had 2 pages and they were kind of developed separately. One was what we thought was going to be the application form and the other one was kind of definitions that would have gone along with it. But when we put them together into one document, it was total redundancy. Things absolutely repeated and it was silly. So Valerie took the initiative there and really streamlined it a lot. I don't think we're missing anything that was on the previous 2 sheets and it's just a lot more straightforward now. Not that it's perfect, it probably never will be, but much improved. All right. So we are at a little past 8:30. I have a fairly long presentation on 2-family dwellings and other residential code problems. I would like to get through. So if you can figure out, Valerie, how to give me access.
I need to host. You wanna read this down?
One thing I learned, so when you bring up the PowerPoint file, do slideshow, that's not there yet. So what do I have to do? Share screen? What? All right, how do I make this big now? So I need something to click on to take control. It's managed to make me look stupid again. There, now I can take share screen. I can click on that, right? Yeah. But what I gotta do. There you go. Yeah, but that's not what I want. Now, so I got it. What's the trick here?
Broadcast selection.
So I can do that, but
My office, I run my space heater nowadays.
Yeah.
I can't do the cold. I love the snow, but as soon as it gets cold, I need a space heater. I need a
We're just getting
blanket.
started.
so when I bring up the slideshow on my screen, it doesn't show there. And I don't know how to get to it again. is big.
How did you just change slides, Scott? Were you clicking on it?
Hmm?
How did you just change slides to the big one?
Well. How do I change slides?
It's like, can you double click on number one with that one slide?
Well, yeah, I can click on any one. But that's, I want to get to a slideshow where it fills a whole screen. Yeah.
When did you outline?
There we go. There it is. I still don't know exactly what I did. Make it smaller, maybe. I want to get rid of that. So that's going to block my view, isn't it? This is silly.
You want to get rid of the pictures? Yes.
I don't know how I get rid of that. I can't do anything to get rid of it. Okay, we'll see how it goes. So this is a follow-up to the accessory apartment code update that I actually presented to the town board at a workshop on September 6th. As I was going through all the accessory apartment code information, I kept looking at other things in the residential parts of the town code. And I discovered a whole bunch of errors, what I would call errors, omissions, and inconsistencies, or at least opportunities in several residential code sections that I want to explain to get opinion of the planning board and anybody else here of whether these things are worth fixing. So these are the roughly 6 topics that I'm going to go over. I want to compare accessory apartments with 2-family dwellings and how differently they are handled in the town code. Because after all, they are similar in their intent of having 2 family units living in the same building in a residential district. We talk about RMD, which is multiple dwelling districts, inconsistencies in that code. Residential parking inconsistencies, R20 and R30 townhouse code inconsistencies. Essentially, they aren't allowed, but they're in the code, at least in terms of building sizes. Short-term rentals, what they are, and the fact that they're not regulated. They're kind of a big issue in New York State at this time. And then lastly is the overall New York State political environment regarding single-family residential zoning. And some of you already have a feeling for what that is, and we'll get to it in more detail later. But essentially, some folks at the state level would like to end home rule regarding the town's ability to restrict residential zoning to single-family residences. And allow things like other families living in basements, attics, other parts of the houses and that sort of thing. So I'm going to provide handouts for a couple of things. So I think you've already got them in the packet that Valerie handed out. So there's 2 things. We'll get to the comparison of 2-family dwelling and accessory apartments. But first of all, I wanted to point out that list of 6 items that you can take notes, and certainly if anybody's free to ask any questions or make comments anywhere as we go through this. But I'm going to ask your opinion on whether these things are worth fixing or not, and whether you would agree with at least working toward that end. So if you want to take notes on those topics as we go through, I'm going to ask at the end, what do you think, whether you think each one is worth fixing?
Quiz at the end.
So what's the fundamental code that controls residential districts? And that's in section 125, I'm sorry, 120-5, definitions and word usage. The following words, or this is directly out of the code, it's a direct copy, cut and paste. The following words or phrases as used in this chapter are defined as follows: family, one or more persons who live together in one dwelling unit and maintain a common household. Dwelling unit. So that family definition I like. I mean, it doesn't make any comments or claims about DNA or whether you're related. It's just whether you live together as one dwelling unit in a common household. Dwelling unit is one or more rooms with provision for living, cooking, sanitary, and sleeping facilities arranged for use of one family. So remember that, arranged for use of one family. Dwelling one family is a building arranged for one dwelling unit. So that's copied again at the top of this next page, but here's the potential definition problem. Note that dwelling unit and dwelling, one family, only state that the building is arranged for use of one family, and therefore it may not exclude other uses such as room rentals, short-term home rentals, or even use by multiple families, so long as the building is arranged for one family. Now, other town codes are much more specific, and I'm going to show you some. In light color up there at the top is Rush again, but Webster says the term dwelling, single family dwelling, or multiple family dwelling shall not be deemed to include a motel, hotel, boarding house, and so forth. Pittsford says a building containing one dwelling unit would be a single family dwelling. A building containing one dwelling unit and designed for and occupied exclusively by one family. You notice it's not just designed for, but it's actually only allowed to be used by one family. Parma, sort of similar, detached residential dwelling unit designed for and occupied exclusively by one or more persons living as a single nonprofit housekeeping unit. Menden says a detached residential dwelling unit or other than a mobile home designed for and occupied exclusively by one or more persons living as a single housekeeping unit. So that's the difference. It's not just designed for use by a single family, but actually used exclusively by a single family. So why bring that up? Well, this is the example. There has been a huge increase in vacation or other short-term rentals. It's called STR, short-term rental, nationwide for rooms or whole homes, such as Airbnb, Vrbo, and 100 other companies. Airbnb and Vrbo certainly are the big ones. Rush has no zoning rules to regulate such STR uses. STRs are common in surrounding communities, and they also exist in Rush. I'll show you some examples later. The definition of a single-family dwelling may not exclude STRs as an allowed accessory use. The code doesn't really forbid that I can see, and I'll talk a lot more about STRs later. So this is the running list of added updates. Clarify a single-family dwelling definition to include and used exclusively by one family and possibly include nonprofit. And there's might be a lot of different ways to do that, but that's the obvious one. Two-family dwelling. This is where I started with my concerns, and I've known this for years. One of the uses allowed in residential districts by a special permit in section 120-7 and 8 and so on. That's the R20, R30 goes on to RR5, for example. Uses permitted upon issuance of a special permit by the planning board. The following uses shall be subject to review and approval by the planning board in accordance with the procedure and standards set forth in 12069. In 12069 is the special permit section. Number 7, two-family dwelling per lot if both dwelling units are owned by a single owner. Okay, so for example, it doesn't forbid both units being rentals, but they have to both be owned by the same owner. And I think that's perhaps the difference between a townhouse and a two-family dwelling is that both two-family dwellings both are owned by the same owner. So this again goes back to some of the definitions and word usage. dwelling, two-family, a building arranged for two dwelling units. Again, it doesn't say anything about exclusively used by two families. So a more typical definition in other towns is a detached residential building containing two dwelling units designed for occupancy and used exclusively by two families independently of each other. That would be a more clear definition of, I think, what the town intends. But that's not the only thing around two family. Well, this is where I get to the other handout. You all have that. Comparison of two-family dwelling and accessory apartments. And I could probably spend half an hour just talking about this. But the takeaway is that two-family dwellings have almost no requirements or restrictions compared to an accessory apartment. An accessory apartment requires a bigger lot than on whether you're an R20 or R30. Accessory apartments require bigger lots than two-family dwellings. Accessory apartments are much more restrictive in their square foot area. Whereas in R20, you could have theoretically a two-family dwelling that has a total of 1,000 square feet, which would be only 500 square feet for each of the two-family units. Or it doesn't say anything about one could be 50 square feet, and the other one could be 950 square feet. And R30 is bigger, but same issue. Maximum floor area of each other is not restricted compared to bedrooms, and not restricted compared to accessory apartment. Not a big deal, perhaps. Ownership, I mentioned for two-family dwellings has to be the same owner for both dwellings, whereas an accessory apartment has to be owned by one of the residents. There's no such residency requirement for two-family buildings. Two-family, accessory apartment requires the affidavit for occupancy, no such thing for two-family. Appearance, there's no restriction. And for accessory apartment, it has to appear as a one-family residence. Driveways, there's no restriction on two-family, whereas accessory apartments, there's no additional driveways allowed. Off-street parking, accessory apartment, one parking space for one family dwelling plus two additional spaces for apartment. We'll talk more about parking later. But there's no code requirement for two families. So it could be a total of two, although multiple dwelling, three or more require two per dwelling. The parking requirements are totally inconsistent across different types of dwellings. I'll get to that later. Two-family dwelling requires a special permit, as does accessory apartment. And the permit termination are more restrictive on accessory apartments. So just go ahead.
Question. So the accessory apartment appears to be, was that a more recent code? And I say recent. It sounds like two-family was done a long time ago. And accessory was done.
You might be able to decipher that from the code, because typically it lists when things were changed or added.
And then someone just didn't
I
go
will
back to
I will say
two-family.
this, accessory apartments were put in with a heck of a lot more thought than two-family dwellings. Like two-family dwelling is kind of one bullet in the special permit section.
Accessory apartments was added as a local law in 2003.
Okay.
Also, it's a later.
So do you have it, is there a reference for two-family?
Yeah.
I'm
And,
gonna try and find that.
and a lot more
Okay.
consideration.
Thank
And I would add, when they added two-family dwelling, they didn't, I don't know, when they added accessory apartments, they didn't think about two-family
Accessory
dwellings being essentially the same thing and an option. All right, this gets to minimum sizes of residential buildings. This is right out of section 120-16, size of buildings. This is the minimum for any main building. So R20 is 1,000 square feet, R30 it's 1,200 square feet, and so on. When you get down to RMD, multiple dwellings, 750 square feet per unit. Okay, for RTH is townhouse, 1,000 square feet per unit. There is no such per unit on R20 and R30, which could have a two-family dwelling, right, with a special permit. So note that per unit is specified for multiple unit dwellings, but it's not indicated at all for two-family units that are allowed by special permit in R20, R30, or R5. So I think that's a limitation. So if you're going to compare the two, the code has no statements about a minimum area for two-family dwellings, nor a minimum for each unit as is specified for multiple family dwellings. The only minimum that can be inferred is for the main building in section 12016, size of buildings, which would be the same total as a single family residence. That would allow each unit size to be small for both units and potentially uncontrollably small for any one unit. What I always do is benchmark other towns. We'll look at Mendon. Code has a similar special permit required in their rural ag districts, which is 1, 2, and 5 acre minimum lots, but requires 2-family dwellings having at least one of the dwelling units occupied by the owner of the property, similar to our accessory apartment requirement, presumed to prevent absentee landlords. It also requires each dwelling unit to meet the floor area requirements of a single family dwelling. Sweden code prohibits 2-family dwellings except in multiple residence districts. Pittsford codes allows 2-family dwellings only in 16,000 square foot lot size districts. You can read that as village, which must have a total floor area 50% greater than the 1-family dwelling minimum. It's not allowed at all in Pittsford in rural residential districts of 3,200 square feet. So it would be like our R30 and 5 acre lot size district. So South Pittsford is 5 acres. I think that's south of the thruway. And they don't allow 2-family dwellings at all in those areas. So the Rush Code that controls 2-family dwellings is grossly inconsistent with the accessory apartment code that has a similar intent of 2 families residing within one structure regarding what features are required, degree, and the severity of those requirements. The Rush Code is lacking important requirements for 2-family dwellings. The Rush Code for 2-family dwellings is more lenient than other nearby town benchmarks, yet applications to the planning board for accessory apartments have outnumbered applications for 2-family dwellings. So these deficiencies have not yet, at least, been a large hardship. So given the fact that 2-family dwellings are not controlled, and you could conceivably do an accessory apartment type building, claiming it's a 2-family dwelling, I don't know why this has never come up more so than it has. I think I have a theory that relatively affluent residents like to say they have an in-law apartment and they can have their in-laws living in their home, whereas nobody wants to say I live in a double. I think that's what it comes down to. So here's 2-family dwelling code options for the town board to consider. And the first step of that is us considering what we'd like to suggest. Allow 2-family dwellings only in RMD and R20. That would be similar to what Pittsford does, the latter by special permit, and require Mendon's 2-family dwelling requirements, their section 260-55. Or another different option would be allow 2-family dwellings with added requirements in all our district, residential districts, but require a special permit for R20, R30, and RR5, and require at least one of the dwelling units must be occupied by the owner of the property in R30 and RR5. So if you want to, what this proposal, the second one proposes is that if you want to be an absentee landlord, you have to be in an R20 district. So there's obviously infinite number of options. You can mix and match any of those, but those are the two I thought of as being somewhat representative of what other towns are doing. So this is what I would propose as a 2-family dwelling requirement based on Mendon's 260-55. At least one of the dwelling units must be occupied by the owner of the property in R30 and RR5 districts. Understand there are no RR5 districts currently in Rush. So it really gets down to R30. The second point is each dwelling unit within a 2-family structure shall meet the minimum living area requirements established for single-family dwellings, or it could be some other minimum, could be no less than 50% or no less than 75% or whatever you wanted to say. Third point, each dwelling unit shall be served with separate utility meters, shut-off valves, and waste disposal facilities. And to be honest, I don't know if that means separate septic systems either. I called the county and they verified that septic systems sizing is based on the total number of bedrooms. So conceivably, you could have a common septic system that is appropriately sized for all the bedrooms combined in a 2-family unit, but it might make other sense to have 2 separate septic systems. Each dwelling unit shall have a shared driveway to a public street. In addition, each driveway shall have an improved asphalt or dust-free surface. Other towns tend to do that. We don't. Each, and notice it says shared driveway. It doesn't say each have their own driveway. Each two-family dwelling structure shall have not less than 2 off-street parking spaces for each dwelling unit, which shall be in addition to a separate garage for each dwelling unit. So notice that this says two parking spaces in addition to 1 garage for each dwelling unit. These parking spaces may be designed as part of the driveway and turnaround area, and I'll get into more parking later. Russia has really strange laws on parking for residential. So this is the second bullet in the list of added updates, running list. Consider and implement two-family dwelling code updates. In addition, add to definition used exclusively by 2 families living independently of each other, and allow various options, but this one is allow 2-family dwellings only in RMD and R20, the latter by special permit, and or add Mendon's 2-family dwelling requirements by special permit. So this moves into now the other residential district, RMD. This is the old town map where I could make out the difference in colors between RMD and R30, between the blue and the green. I can't do that on the current version. But east and west of the hamlet in our little town here, east and west of where we're seated right now, are RMD districts. The Methodist Church is in RMD, for example. This is the definition of multiple dwelling in the Rushtown Code, section 120-5. This is bizarre and not like anything I've seen in any other town, but it defines dwelling multiple, a building containing 3 or more dwelling units. Now that is typical. Multiple dwelling in New York State town codes is typically 3 or more, does not include 2. So don't let that confuse you. I think whoever did parts of our code was confused by that. But this is 3 or more dwelling units, and that's not unusual, it's typical. But number 1, a building containing living, sanitary, and sleeping facilities occupied. I might have done something wrong there. A building containing living, sanitary, and sleeping facilities occupied by 1 or 2 families and more than 4 lodgers residing with either one of such families. No other town has that. Number 2, a building with 1 or more sleeping rooms other than a 1 or 2 family dwelling used and occupied by permanent or transient paying guests or tenants. So my question is does a bed and breakfast or STR qualify for that? 3, a building with sleeping accommodations for more than 5 persons used or occupied as a club, dormitory, fraternity, or sorority house, or for similar uses. Again, other towns don't have that. 4, a building used or occupied as an old age home. 5, community residence, and there's no definition of what a community residence is. So you note that this does not include 2-family dwellings, even though the idea that multiple dwellings is 3 or more is typical of other towns. Notice items 1 to 5 are unusual and even bizarre and are not found in other town codes. Could 2 be a B&B or STR, community residence, and 5 is not further defined. More typically, towns would omit 1 to 5 and add a building containing 3 or more dwelling units used for occupancy by 3 or more families living independently of each other. And that would be the extent of the definition for multiple dwelling. So, related note, RMD, permitted uses. The following uses shall be permitted in the RMD residential districts. A1, multiple dwellings and accessory garages. Does that mean 1 multiple family dwelling building per lot or more than 1 building? Why not worded as 1 or more multiple family dwellings per lot? So it's clear. If you were looking to allow apartment buildings in Rush, I would think you'd want RMD to include 1 or more multiple family dwellings per lot. I don't know what the current wording means. It also allows, number 2, 1 single family dwelling per lot. Okay, so single family dwelling is a directly permitted use in RMD. And then B, with a special permit, you can have townhouse clusters and developments, accessory uses, accessory structures and recreational areas. This, and also with a special permit, the same uses as are permitted in R20 district and R30 upon the issuance of the special permit. And that does include two-family dwellings and accessory apartments. So why is a special permit for two-family dwellings required in RMD, but not for a single family or for three or more families or multiple family dwellings? So it's just bizarre. It's a quirk of the code that you need a special permit for two-family dwellings in RMD, but not for single family or multiple family, three or more. So I would add two-family dwelling in accordance with a new code section on two-family dwellings to the short list of directly permitted uses in RMD, just to be consistent. So that's the, if I wanted to add to the running list, number 3, rationalize the definition and clarify permitted uses in RMD. Simplify dwelling multiple definition and add use for occupancy by 3 or more families living independently of each other, and possibly add B and B as a permitted use, since that's what seems to be there already. Now, I will add that, no, I'll get to that later.
Interrupt just for a second. Do you happen to have, you have the same
That's what I was.
ThinkPad?
Can we see if your plug fits in this?
Oh, you need power?
Yeah. We're about
See if
to-
it works.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
But my computer's saying, I'm dying. Okay. Use one multiple family dwelling per lot or one or more multiple family dwellings per lot, if that's what's intended. Add one two-family dwelling per lot as directly permitted in RMD. One last issue, resident, I'll talk more about B and Bs later. One last issue in addition to the STRs, residential parking. So again, this is copied, cut and paste right out of the code. Required off-street parking. A, at least the following off-street parking spaces, each being at least 10 by 20 feet, together with suitable access drive, shall be provided and satisfactorily maintained, blah, blah, blah. So multiple dwellings, required spaces, 2 parking spaces for each apartment or dwelling unit to be contained in such structure. 1 parking space for apartment or dwelling unit shall be within an enclosed garage. All unenclosed parking areas shall be screened from adjacent properties. But you notice in multiple dwellings, you have to have 2 parking spaces for each dwelling unit plus 1 in the garage.
Well,
Oh, one of them
One
shall be,
such, yeah.
one of them shall be in a garage. Okay, fair enough. 1 family dwelling, look what it says. 1 parking space. Does that make any sense to anybody? That a 1 family dwelling would require less space than a multiple, than one dwelling part of a multiple family dwelling? And no garage requirement? It's just bizarre. I'm not the only person to notice that. As previously noted by the Zoning Citizens Committee, the requirement of 1 parking space for a single family dwelling is illogical and inconsistent with accessory apartments, which require 2 multiple family dwellings, 2 per dwelling, 1 of which is in a garage. And by the way, there's no parking requirement for a 2-family dwelling, which is also illogical and inconsistent, and why that should be part of a new 2-family dwelling code section. So there it is, number 4, the added running list. Change single-family dwelling to 2 spaces with 1 in a closed garage, similar to all other dwelling unit requirements. And I should say, add 2-family parking requirements to a new section for 2-family dwellings. So remember this, minimum sizes of residential buildings, minimum gross floor area. You notice there's R20 and R30 and RMD townhouses require 1,000 square feet per unit. The problem is townhouses are not allowed in R20 and R30. So that's another inconsistency. It just shouldn't be there. Now, 120-16 size of building says townhouses are only allowed in RTH, which is townhouse, and RMD with a special permit. But no RTH district currently exists in Rush and would be zoned as RTH district only upon application for a specific proposal. So I'm not gonna say it's an overlay like a solar tier 3, but essentially it requires a rezoning if somebody wants to have a RTH district. Therefore, it makes no sense to show building size for townhouses in R20 and R30 districts. That just adds confusion.
Agreed.
So that's number 5 on my list. Omit R20 and R30 townhouses in the size of buildings. Short-term rentals are not regulated. So I recently took a class from the New York State Association of Towns, and their class is called From Airbnb to VRBO and everything in between, regulating short-term rentals in your jurisdiction. Turns out STRs are very common in our area, notably more so in Rochester and the Finger Lakes. One study suggests that STRs only need 25% occupancy to provide the same return as a long-term rental. So in other words, you can just charge that much more, and you can charge people cleaning and everything else. You can make a lot more money in the short term and don't need to rent it all the time. My personal experience suggests that STRs and Rush could be more popular than you might expect, and that's a compliment to Rush. I'm just saying that because last Thanksgiving, not quite a year ago, my family of 10, my 2 daughters and their families rented a multi-million-dollar VRBO rental in the mountains of Georgia near the Tennessee border in a little town called Blue Ridge, a great little tourist trap. Very well done. I mean, the view from this place was amazing. It had its own gated driveway going down and up the hill to it. But that area really had a lot less to offer overall for tourism than Rochester, than Rush does. I mean, we hiked on a number of ungodly tiny mountain trails to look at some waterfalls flowing down over the mountains, including part of it on the Appalachian Trail, which starts about 4 miles in Springer Mountain from where we were on it to see a waterfall. But my point is here you got Letchworth State Park, those wonderful waterfalls. You got Niagara Falls, you got Tunkhannock Falls and other Buttermilk Falls down near Ithaca. You got on rainy days, you got world-class museums, the George Eastman House and the Museum of Play. The list goes on of things you can do in this area compared to where we were. And there's no reason somebody can have, not to mention the Finger Lakes and wine, the 3rd best wine region in the country. So there's no reason Rush and anywhere around here couldn't be popular. This, in fact, is a picture of the VRBO rentals near Rush. So Rush is right here in the middle. Here's Honey Lake Falls. This little marker here is where Rush is. You see a good population in Henrietta and Rochester and down around the Finger Lakes. This is an Airbnb actually in Rush. Right here it says Rush, New York, United States. This, I believe, is on Pinnacle. You typically don't get addresses unless you start signing up. They keep it a little bit secretive. $55 for a basement studio. And it looks like there is a door here, so it looks like reasonable access. But what's to say somebody else couldn't rent out something that's downstairs with almost no egress in the case of emergency? This is a real class one. This is in Airbnb's glamming section. Glamping, I should say, which is a gourmet camping, right? Or glamorous camping, I should say. This guy's renting out a grain bin. They call it a silo, but it's a grain bin, right? Got a bedroom in it, got a fire pit outside. There was a mention of a composting toilet, but there's no water facilities here. But they're getting $100 a night for a bed in a silo.
And that's in Rush.
It says in Rush, yeah, right here, Rush, New York, United
But it
States.
says, doesn't it say Holly? Oh, that's the name of the person.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
It's in Rush?
No, it's in Rush. Right there is
Really?
Rush, United States, right there, that word.
Huh.
I didn't go any further to see where it is, but it's interesting. And, the people were commenting, they loved it. They said it's such an unusual place to spend a weekend or whatever. So there are people who this type of thing appeals to. Why regulate STRs? Bed and breakfast inns are effectively not allowed in Rush. Now, B&Bs are defined in section 120-5, 120-13 restricted business, RB districts do allow B and Bs with a special permit is listed, but Rush has no RB districts. Okay, if we had them, B and Bs would be allowed. So there are no RB districts. STRs, short-term rentals, don't qualify as B and Bs because no food served typically. And then you remember something that looked like might be a B and B might be allowed in our MD, a multiple dwelling section, although it's not called a B and B, it just says short-term rentals or something like that. So given that other uses like B and Bs are highly restricted and regulated, why would SDRs be allowed, especially without some regulation? So the risks to the residents are other residents, loss of residential feel of the neighborhood, light, noise, trash, parking. Then there's a customer protection issue, room egress, emergency evacuation, customer service, emergency backup, smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, maximum occupancy, trash removal, sanitary facilities. None of those things are controlled. Well, there are benefits to STRs, income of residents, possible future fees and town income. Now, New York state law does not allow a fee assessment yet, but there could be future taxation of STR providers like Airbnb and Vrbo. You could get increased area tourism, generally good for the area, economic development, future development opportunities. I would question whether current STRs are actually collecting and remitting sales tax. They are a business, they are charging a fee for a service. How might short-term rentals, STRs, be regulated? This class, they recommended a moratorium in the short term, as is often done when we're trying to get a handle on how to regulate something. But generally, it involves a special permit to establish the facility, and then a building inspector or code enforcement officer inspection and operating permit as well. The town of Canadice, not far from here, is considered to have the gold standard of zoning codes for STRs and would be easy to emulate as a way to avoid legal pitfalls. For example, you can't have a residency requirement for an STR, for the owner of the STR, because that would be against the constitutional commerce clause in the US Constitution. But you can require emergency responses to be quick. How might they be regulated? Clear legislative intent and purpose is required, explicit STR definition, advertising of STRs has a presumption of the dwelling operating as an STR. Permit requirements must be clearly stated, clear application requirements, clear general requirements for building code, septic, insurance, trash removal, rental contract, and clear provisions for penalties, permit revocation, and appeals. There is something going on at the state level, similar to what I'll get into in a minute. There was legislation to tax vacation rental providers that proposed in the 2022 and 23 executive budget. That would have required Airbnb and Vrbo to collect sales tax on rentals they facilitate, but that was stricken from the final budget. So that didn't make it this time. In addition, this general New York State political environment gets at the heart of some of the things I'm talking about here in kind of the opposite direction. New York State legislature debates single-family zoning. To boost the state's housing supply, some New York lawmakers want to eliminate local control over single-family zoning. Single-family zoning once again takes center stage as New York State lawmakers dispute the merits of proposed bills that would preempt local zoning codes, allowing homeowners to rent out secondary units such as basements, top floors, and other accessory dwelling units, unit types. So that's what's known as ADU, accessory dwelling unit. As David Brand reports, housing advocates argue that single-family zoning and the state laws that allow local jurisdictions to enforce it are suppressing housing construction and enabling New York's affordable housing shortage. So, legislation requiring local governments to allow a minimum of one accessory dwelling or ADU on owner-occupied single-family lots was part of the 2022-23 executive budget, just like I mentioned for taxation of STRs, but what also was stricken from the final budget due to pushback. One earlier version would have allowed local prohibition of STRs being used in ADUs. So Rush presumably does not intend to allow more than one family unit within a single family residence and basements, attics, attached garages, or an accessory structure, or more than one dwelling building on a typical residential lot. We can say that Rush already provides alternatives within single-family zoning districts and alternatives to single-family zoning districts, such as accessory apartments, two-family dwellings, and some or all residential districts. And then there's multiple dwelling districts. As always, higher residential density options in Rush are limited by lack of public sewers, regardless of New York legislature edicts about home rule. Addition of living, sleeping accommodations to a single-family residence would require review of septic capability based on the total number of bedrooms. And that may or may not require increased capacity, such as tank size and leach field lines. So that's the full list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So my questions to this planning board is, are some or all of these omissions and inconsistencies worth fixing? And that's the handout I gave you. Clarify single-family dwelling definition, implement two-family dwelling code updates, rationalize definition and clarify permitted uses in RMD, change single-family dwelling to 2 parking spaces with 1 enclosed garage, and then omit R20 and R30 townhouses from the size of buildings, and provide new law to regulate short-term rentals. Comments from the board and anybody else are welcome.
Well, to answer your question, yes, these inconsistencies and omissions are worth fixing.
Especially with two family, I can see that could be updated. for
Yes.
sure. Yeah, no question there.
Single-family dwelling definition? That seems lacking. Yeah, I agree, that needs
I agree.
updating.
It should be designed for whatever they're.
Yeah. And used exclusively by
Yeah.
one
Parking,
family,
parking is
2 families.
obviously an issue.
Yep. So then you get to that strange list of 5 or so mostly unusual uses of RMD districts, which gets to everything, including community.
I think that should just be a bullet underneath the. I was just looking at the code, so it lists, what single family and then so forth. That multiple should just be brought underneath that one.
It's so consistent with, it would be a building designed for 3 or more family units and used exclusively by 3 or more family units. Is that what you mean? Living independently of each other. Similar to what a 2-family would be.
Yes. So under dwelling definition.
Yeah,
it has
okay.
1, 2, 3, 4. So
Right.
dwelling detached, dwelling 1 family, dwelling
Right.
2 family, and which will be, those
Yep.
will be expanded.
Yep.
That then dwelling multiple would be number 5. With just one definition and those other.
Those other strange ones be omitted.
Yes.
That's where I come out.
I mean,
If you intend. if you
my
intend-
understanding in the community residence would be the vested type residence, the group homes.
Oh, okay. We ought to define that. If you want a group home, define it as a group home.
No, there's at least 3.
There's a couple of them, yeah.
One on our road, one up.
Yeah.
River Road. and-
Although those aren't in RMDs, the ones I know of anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So I wonder how that was allowed.
Yeah, the other one,
No, I'm not
250
disagreeing, but I just
251,
You
wonder.
got one middle and 251,
Right, 251 and
River Road and 251.
Yeah. And that's another one I know of,
And those are all just residential.
and then Woodruff.
There's one in Woodruff too?
Yep.
John Morelli's messaged in.
Ask a question. What?
John Morelli said regarding the requirement that the single-family dwelling should have 2 spaces with 1 in an enclosed garage. Question, could both be within an enclosed garage?
If I remember correctly, the single family didn't have that requirement. The single
It did
family
not.
had just 1.
Right.
And it was the remember the other.
The RMD required, I think, 2 parking spaces with 1 in the garage.
And
And men did that for 2 family, I think, or something like that. So anyway,
So the,
I think there's 2 separate questions. I think clearly most references, whether it's in Rush or other towns, require 2 parking spaces per dwelling. So that's one, I think that's rational. The other one is, should one be in an enclosed garage? And that is not now required in a single family dwelling,
what is required. for-
but is required in multiple family dwelling.
But to me, that would make sense to be consistent, and also, so it's a minimum, 2 spaces, 1 in the garage as a minimum, so it would be worded in such a way that obviously you could have 2, 3, 4 car garages.
Those are minimums, yeah,
Yeah.
those are minimums.
Seems like standard is 3-car garage.
I mean,
now.
there are houses being built and very, very recently without garages in
Yeah,
Rush.
a few of them.
There's one near me, but just a few years after they built the house, they put a big addition on it with garages.
Yeah, there's 2 on East River, right across
Yeah.
from where I am.
It certainly wouldn't be unique to Rush. And then I think the omit R20 and R30 townhouses, it's pretty obvious because we don't allow it, but yet we have a minimum building size for it. Then the big one is the law to regulate short-term rentals. It seems to me that's almost inevitable. We're just gonna grow and grow.
I agree, and to regulate to a point of at least having come under the code enforcement or permit, just that they could be in.
Yeah, I'm not saying prevent them. I'm not even sure you could if you wanted to, but they ought to have a lot of regulating.
I mean, in terms of safety.
Yeah, well, safety is a big part. Safety of the customers, and then there's just the living standards of the surrounding neighborhood. And it kind of goes along with my thinking on home occupations. I think we want to give people opportunities to have home occupations. This could be one type of that, right? It's a way to make money off your home, but it shouldn't be unregulated.
But that is an interesting, if you're advertising a glamping
Yeah,
as an STR.
with a so-called composting toilet.
Composting.
And apparently no shower. I don't know what they would do for a sink.
Right, but that's, I mean, then you have to define what
Yeah,
camping or a campsite.
yeah, Yeah.
Minimum requirements.
yeah. Yeah, so I didn't look at Canadice's code in detail.
Yeah.
But it's long, it's many pages. What I'm hearing is general agreement that this stuff is worth going after.
Absolutely.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
In your chart here, comparing the 2-family and accessory apartment.
Yep.
And I was trying to hold on to it as you were going through it, where, took at either minimum or maximum square footage
Yes.
and no restriction on 2-family, maximum of the accessory. It seemed to me there was something that was questionable as to the, out of the total square footage of the house, if you were going to have a 2-family or an accessory, that it didn't define what the minimum had to be, wasn't
For
it?
2-family, there is, the only restriction is the minimum. It's 1,000 square feet. Minimum total building, quote, main building in R20 and 1,200 square feet main building, because there is no 2-family listed in that section on minimum building sizes, residential building sizes. There's no 2-family listed, even though it is an allowed use with a special permit. So the only thing you can refer to is what's called the main building, which refers to the single family minimum. Right. So there's no statement about how big each of the units has to be. It's only the main building.
That's what I'm asking. I mean, if it was like a 1,500 square foot total
Right,
building house.
you could have one, theoretically, you could have one that's 1 square foot and one that's 1499.
That's
right?
what I'm,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
yeah.
but I was getting,
Yeah,
wait a minute. Is that
That's
right?
why, so one of the towns, I forget which one it was, I think Mendon might have said each unit in a two-family has to be at least 50% of the single-family requirement, right, which is 50/50. And one of the others, maybe Pittsford, says no, it has to be 100%. Each unit of a two-family has to be as big as the minimum of a one-family. So that's the way they did it. And I'm not saying what's right. The town board really needs to weigh in. We could come up with a recommendation, but I think there ought to be some minimum for two-family, for each unit.
May I ask, do you know whether any of this is being considered under the comprehensive plan update? Or are you guys involved in that?
As far as I understand, the comprehensive plan has not focused on zoning. And zoning
Not on
issues.
zoning.
There's been, and John can elaborate.
I don't know if John's still paying attention.
But you know, there is a piece of it that that will look at it, but I don't think to this level of detail would not be. I don't think it come up.
Yeah, so there is a downside perhaps of some of these things like STRs. In fact, in that STR training, they recommended the comprehensive plan have something about STRs so that the code can be written consistently with it. So this may be getting the cart before the horse, but
Well, it's just that
it can be
it is
simultaneous.
all happening at the same
Yeah,
time
yeah.
you're reviewing this, so.
It could be simultaneous,
Right,
but you want to be
it could
consistent.
Correct.
So it's a matter of, I mean, if there's some information that could be shared with the comprehensive plan update committee. I don't know if they want the whole slide deck or just bullet points that you pointed out, just to make them aware of some of the issues.
I'd be happy to do anything that's useful, or, you know, you can have it, and sometimes you're better off getting somebody other than the person who came up with the whole thing, because I have a hard time whittling it down. Whereas other people who aren't as involved would be better able to whittle it down, but
By the way,
I'm happy to
zoning
do
is
it.
on the agenda for the public workshop this tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night.
So I'm happy to do whatever that group would want.
I think this, yeah, there is at least clarifications that could be brought to light, that maybe not the level of detail you have, but just saying that we need to address some of these inconsistencies and issues, omissions, problems in the two-family code, and STRs especially, I think should be at least a topic or brought up to the group to be addressed in the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, so I mean, I did, after I took the training, I did send a note to John.
Okay.
And said, I suggested that STRs be included in the comprehensive plan, because that's what they suggested.
Yeah.
So he's aware that I made that recommendation at least, but we didn't get into this other detail. Okay, so I'm hearing general agreement that these things are generally worth fixing. The devil's in the details, I suppose. And that would be the position of the planning board. So then it's a matter of, I mean, it's a lot of time, as you just witnessed, Gene, for the town board to sit through this level of detail. Given my druthers, I would present it, and they could say, well, no, thanks, we've got more important things to do. Or they could say, yeah, I think it's worth coming up with something that's better along the lines of what we talked about. And that could be done with the planning board taking the lead, with the town board taking the lead. I mean, with the farm laws, the town board took the lead with accessory apartments and maybe some other things like flag lots that we'll get to pretty soon. The planning board has taken the lead. But either way, I think the town board ought to hear the issues somehow, maybe not this level of detail, and formulate your opinion of what's worth working on.
I agree, at a workshop would be great. And then,
I'd be happy to do it.
I would, thank you, appreciate that. You know, at least to, if nothing else, address the inconsistencies and these.
So I did warn you this was coming. This is
Yes.
more detail in broader areas than I thought, but when I did the accessory apartments, I warned that there was more.
Okay.
All right, good enough. I've taken a lot of time. I'm pleased. It's still only 9:40. For us, that's not bad. So the agenda, we're down to EV charging.
I just have some more information to relay. I thought I could do it fairly quickly. I did.
Should get out of this. Keep going.
I did have a conversation with this town supervisor because he owns an electric vehicle. I just was curious as far as when is the demand for electric charging? So I wanted, go ahead. If I have, do I have permission to share my screen?
And
Do I have to do anything? I think I'm,
Yeah, you're still sharing your screen, I think, or no?
I don't think I am.
I don't know.
You told me I was no longer
Says host
sharing.
disabled participant screen share.
You just see my
Oh, there we
face.
go.
I'm not sharing.
We're good.
Do this.
Okay. All right. So interesting. Okay, so I have this website, which is the top. Right out of the Department of Energy. And what I found is that there's actually some modeling that they've done, some estimating, some tools that they put together. And this is for Rochester area. And you could put in whatever number you want for a fleet size. I put in the minimum, so 1,101 is the number of vehicles that we'd be looking at. But basically what I got out of this was kind of the, what's in the area. 27 workplace level 2 charging plugs, 22 public level 2 charging plugs, which when Rush gets theirs, that would become 23 public level 2 charging plugs.
We have them.
So this says,
It's not mapped yet.
this says to support 100 and,
They're functioning though.
Yeah,
all-
they're functioning
Right,
right in the parking lot by the,
good.
this says what you would need is to support 1,100 plug-in
Yes.
vehicles, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's saying that just in this area, currently is about 1,100 plug-in vehicles out of a population of 673,000 light-duty vehicles. So it's a very rough model. It's not specific, but it's specific modeling for the area. The other interesting thing that they put together was a load profile, meaning who's charging when, what. But what I thought was interesting here is that it gave so you can see majority of it is being done overnight. People get home from work, they plug in there. So if you take away the, and there's, this is assuming everyone, 100% of the vehicles can be charged at home. So I take away the home level, and then you can see between the work level 1 is the slower charger. People can plug in when they get to work. Work level 2 is that faster charger. And I had the definitions, basically the level 2 is an hour for every 25 miles. And then the DC fast, or the very fast charging is, hang on, I got that. So that. Share that. A little difficult to see, but level 1 charging is about 5 miles of range per hour of charging. So basically you go plug it in at home. So an 8-hour charge.
You read that as a 110 volt or 120 volt?
Yes.
Right?
So AC plug, 120 volts. Level 2 is 25 miles of range for an hour of charging. So again, an 8-hour charge would get you 200 miles. The DC fast charging is 100 to 200 plus miles of range for 30 minutes of charging. So basically that's what they're installing along the thruway.
What's the ones in Rush? Are they the level 2?
I'm guessing, but I don't,
I think they are level 2.
Do you have to like credit card? What,
Yes.
is that what you do?
yeah. Swipe the ink cord.
And you can leave your car right there and charge whatever.
Yeah, right here.
So here's a picture of all the level 2 and DC fast charging stations in the area. And the one on West Henry Road shows up, but the town hall does not show up yet. Honey Falls, down here in Avon, and
The town walls has a couple.
so, they're getting more and more. A lot of these, and many of these are the Tesla, which are kind of proprietary. If you don't have a Tesla, you're not going to charge there, basically.
Are they changing that?
Not that I know of yet. That gets back to this type of connector, the level 1, level 2 charging, the standard connector is this J1772 for most cars, and then there's the Tesla, which is
Oh, I
proprietary. Tesla will provide an adapter so that you can charge at any place, but there is
Not
no
the
adapter
reverse.
in the
Okay.
reverse. Same thing with the DC fast charging. There's an additional connector to go on the J12772 to do the fast DC, or this CHAdeMO connector. And then Tesla has, again, proprietary for theirs. So so I did go through and I found the map for DC fast. And you can see it over Eastview Mall, Fairport.
Those are the Teslas in Eastview Mall.
Yes,
This is the fast charge you said?
and then down at Lakeville, at the exit. For that,
There's a big truck mart thing.
Right.
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, Quick Lease, is that what it is?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but what I was interested in goes back to this loading. I'm assuming that this for the public. Let me go back to. what was interesting here, so, work level one is the plug-in. So someone gets to work and they just plug it in. So there's, that was a very low usage. So this work level two, you can see people arrive at work and they just plug it in and then, unplug it and move it. But this public level two, so this is what intrigued me, because I'm assuming that this big lump here
People are hooking them up overnight, right?
are late night, and I'm assuming that would be more of a destination of a hotel, that type of thing. I don't know, I couldn't really get a sense of whether somebody would come to town hall here and plug in at 8 o'clock at night and charge till midnight. I don't know if that's going to happen. But I would assume that.
Either you sleep in your car, you gotta have something to do, or it's gotta be close enough to walk to
Exactly,
someplace where you can
exactly.
sleep, right?
And I did ask our supervisor, so do we have a place set up so someone could wait while they're charging their car? And he said, hadn't thought about that. So those are considerations I think that may or may not be within what we need to do here is, so I'm assuming that, somebody would use a public as either to stop on their way for a destination, or it's just, so that's where I'm coming to, is that I think we just getting a handle on who's using this, and it's still not completely clear, but I'm assuming that the ones in the late evening are going to be more, they've reached their destination at the hotel or a restaurant or something. So they have some place to hang out or someplace to be. So during the day, they can drop their car, they either go to, go to work nearby. One isn't provided at their place of employment, so they have to plug into someplace public. So but I was these are interesting, the models that have been done for different areas. So I was just trying to get some additional information.
And they're all for fee, right? They're not just ones you plug in for. I know we have them at RIT, but I don't know if, I'm sure you have to pay, right?
Yes,
Yeah, all of them.
there's I forget what the going rate was, something like 16 cents a kilowatt hour. There's a rate that's typical for what you have to pay.
Oh,
The interesting thing though is temperature. It's
Cold.
air temperature, outside temperature.
outside ambient temperature.
Yeah.
These are basically the cars work best 72 degrees.
Right.
But once you get hotter, the performance goes down, and once you get colder, performance goes down. In fact, they said the slope in warmer weather degrades faster than the colder weather.
Wow.
So, so basically, if your car has a range of 160 miles on a normal, if you get to colder temperatures, less than 0, it'll drop you down to 100 miles of range. So in that case, I did if I was going to go from Rochester to Connecticut, where our headquarters is, and I had an electric car and it was 0 degrees, I would have to stop 6 times.
So there's a loss in the battery efficiency, but you also have to generate heat for the cabin in the winter,
Yeah.
which you don't have a byproduct of heat from internal combustion engines.
So
Yeah, you're heating it, you're cooling it,
So the air conditioning aspect, yeah, and the heating aspect, that's what really drops that.
So you're saying the range of the car goes down, not the efficiency of the battery. Right. Part of it is the heating and cooling, okay, of the cabin.
Yeah, and it may have to do with the efficiency of the battery, but it also has to do because the temperature is. So anyways, it's just very interesting of how this is, how this may or may not all I'm getting a lot of, some other information that it may not make sense in the long run for being 100% electric. That, so so I just wanted to, I was just gonna share some of the,
Are you suggesting we should install more charging stations?
I would if we were kind of in an area that we're in connecting dots, but there's enough in Rochester area, and then along the way, that we're not in a, if someone who would, leaving Rochester would not stop and rush,
You're not a final
do a
destination,
charge.
yeah.
so yet. So if there were more hotels, if there were,
More STRs and B&Bs.
yes, or commercial, establishments, some destination, then it would make more sense to put more public facilities.
Essentially gotta have some place for people to hang out. That's why there's Night Eastview Mall, or along 95 in
Oh,
Florida,
at the
Georgia,
mall.
they're at hotel centers
I
where
know
there's
out
5
west,
hotels. around.
Starbucks is working with charging unit manufacturers to put them near Starbucks.
I know we stayed at a hotel down in Erie, and there were 5 Tesla charging stations right there in the hotel parking lot, so.
We've stayed many times at a place in Brunswick, Georgia, just north of Florida, right off of 95. And there's 4 or 5 hotels nearby, but there have to be about 30 Tesla charging stations, and I've never seen more than about 3 or 4 cars there. It's amazing.
So my takeaway from all this, as far as coming to a code, is that I would, this is the village of Chittenango that I modeled this after. And basically it's minimum requirements for an installation, level 2 or level 3. So basically, and this is where I'm just kind of asking, throwing it out there, this is basically saying that we're going to have a permit issued for a charging station. It has to have bollards to protect have protection from someone hitting it, and it has to meet building and fire safety, fire codes, electrical codes, that type of thing. So
Does any of them have like a suppression, any fire suppression or any?
I have not,
Just curious.
I have to go back and look at the code, the fire code, as far as, but yeah, I know there have been instances of the electric vehicles catching fire. I don't know if that's something that has been addressed by the New York State Fire Code or not, but until I guess that becomes more problematic, I don't know if they'll have suppression systems needed at the sites. So instead of, and there was one in, Town of Greece has a code that talks about minimum number of parking spaces, how much they could take away from parking at the facilities, and getting into a lot more detail. I don't think at this time makes any sense to get into that detail here. And again, this was completely, I took out the word town, or took out the word village, put town in, took out the word Chittenango, put Rush. So, but I guess what I'd like to do with the next step is, to develop something that would actually be, and I think it would fit in the 120 code right after solar installations. Electrical vehicle charging systems.
It'll be like a 120/64.2 or something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I put at the top.
I mean, we just did the battery energy storage systems.
Did you?
Yes.
So is that 120/64.2?
Well, I can't remember the.
It
I
could
don't
be
have
the
it
next
with
one.
me,
I don't remember either.
It would be whatever's in the sequence. Yeah. The same.
but you can look at that. and
Okay.
See how that may dovetail with that. I mean, it's related, certainly.
Well, we don't have a lot of good options in our code. I mean, for numbers, that's what I mean.
I'll take a look.
Yeah, my view is that something like this is sufficient. I don't think we'll have a huge demand here in Russia, as you say, we're not a destination,
I don't think so.
but you hate to have nothing.
But we do have a company that.
Yeah, we have one in town, right?
All right, I will,
Just one quick question. So if somebody plugs in and they pay, this may sound stupid. Does there any of that revenue go to actually Rush, or does it go to how?
There's,
Just curious how it.
I'm not totally understanding exactly how it's working. I know that we're not looking to make a lot of money
No, I understand.
on this, and more as an accommodation. And so, for the minimum amount to be charged, so people would pay, whether there would be a surcharge. I think that's something that is determined on a locality by locality. So yes, there'll be a basic charge, will pay for the power. And whether anybody has a fee on top of that, it's up to the municipality. And I don't think Rush is doing that.
but we are definitely covering any power or energy costs.
Right, we're
Sure,
not
understand.
paying
Yes,
for
I
it,
understand, right.
but we're not making any.
We're not making.
Yeah. Just to, have an accommodation to people who want to visit Rush.
Now, if something happens to the unit out there, is whoever installed it, is that something Rush would pay? Somebody drives into it and hits it or whatever.
That's a good question.
Just curious, I
I don't
mean-
know.
Somebody drives away with the cord hooked to, I don't know, something stupid and wonder,
Obviously could happen, right?
I think some
Yeah,
electric cars don't let you do that, that it knows when it's.
it knows when.
Yeah.
So I will develop something in a draft and send that out to everyone, to take a look at. And see if that's something you want to pursue.
Good.
So it is 120-64.2.
Battery.
Battery
Okay,
energy
it is equal to
services.
3.
How do you know this?
I just know. I just know. Okay.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Steve, for remembering that.
Well, we could all go all the way to 120-64 point infinity, right? So we got a lot, we got a lot of numbers there.
And beyond.
Okay. Anything else before we get to new applications? All right, new applications is easy. There are none for December. Our next meeting is scheduled for December 27th. That is between Christmas and New Year's.
I may be out of town.
I want to give us a Christmas present and cancel the meeting.
Hey, Scott.
It is also my birthday.
Ah.
I made it this far. I'm 39.
Yeah, good.
Just like Jack Benny.
So no December meeting.
It's just a bad time of year for meetings. Great time of year, but not for meetings. Okay, so
We worked hard this year.
we did. We had a lot, so we didn't have a meeting last month by default, and we won't have one in December, but if you add up all the hours that we had meetings, they're not unusual for us to go to this time. Okay, anything else? If not, I move that we adjourn. By
second
unanimous
that.
consent. I think we agree.